There's this neuropsychologist named L. Conan Goldberg. And Goldberg was a student of Alexander Luria. And Alexander Luria was a Russian neuropsychologist, perhaps the foremost neuropsychologist of the mid to late 20th century. And he had students, Sokolov and Vinogradova, who discovered the orienting reflex, for example. The orienting reflex is the reflex that orients you when something anomalous interferes with your goal-directed behavior. It was a major discovery, like one of the 4 or 5 most important discoveries that have ever been made in psychology, I would say, certainly in neuroscience. So Luria was a big deal. And he was the first person who really established the functional role of the prefrontal cortex as well. So, and he had a very nice overall view of how the brain functioned. His book was written in 1980, and there's still lots in it that's really useful, which is pretty strange for a science that's advanced that quickly. Anyways, so Goldberg came from a great pedigree. I believe Luria's teacher was Pavlov, if I remember correctly. So, anyways, Goldberg, you know, you hear, some of you may have heard the idea that the left hemisphere is more linguistic than the right hemisphere is. The left hemisphere is specialized for language, and the right hemisphere is specialized for nonverbal imagistic communication. The left hemisphere has a pretty well-organized microstructure, and the right hemisphere is more diffuse as well. And that's true in left-handed males in particular. So the circuitry can be switched around a bit, but it's okay. The modules are basically the same, although they can be moved a little bit. But Goldberg thought that it isn't language versus non-language, it's routine versus novelty. And so the left hemisphere, and there's a neuropsychologist, physician named Ramachandran, who's done some very interesting work that's pertinent to this. Maybe I'll tell you a story about him. Anyways, Goldberg believed that the right hemisphere, so you have very old systems underneath both cortical hemispheres that do things like respond to anomaly, to the thing that doesn't fit, to the predator in the distance. Some of that's extraordinarily fast, so that would be like a snake reflex that can move you away from a snake in less time than it takes the snake to bite. And it's really a reflex, it doesn't even hit your brain, it's really super fast. And then there's a defensive crouch that's instantiated higher up in the nervous system, but that's still remarkably fast. And then there's fear as an emotion, and the orientation of attention, and then there's the cognitive processing, and that all streams out across a time span, right? And maybe that time span is half a second. So, and that's really a long time if something is attacking you. So you got those initial responses are quite primitive, but they're extraordinarily fast. All right, so there's subcortical structures that orient you towards novelty and prepare you for freezing or for attending. And the right hemisphere seems to be dominated by those systems. So imagine that what happens is that something threatens you, you orient towards it, the right hemisphere produces a bunch of images about what it might be. So imagine that's what happens when a child is afraid of the dark. The child's on the bed, they're afraid of the dark, they're crouched because they're frozen like a prey animal, and their right hemisphere is producing monsters to inhabit the darkness that are the child's hypotheses about what might be out there. Okay. Because that's what you want to know, right? You want to know what's out there, and then you want to know what to do about it. I can tell you 2 kids' dreams that are sort of relevant to that. So, when my daughter was about 3, she came into the bedroom that my wife and I had, and she was crying. She'd had a nightmare, and she said that she saw a stream, and there was garbage all over the stream, and she didn't like that. And so I sat her down, and I said, okay, so imagine the stream with the garbage in it. Now imagine that you're taking the garbage out and throwing it in a garbage bin. And so I got her to like visualize that, because that kind of puts her back in the semi-dream state, and then she cleaned up the mess, and then she could go off to sleep. Now you could tell the child, don't worry about it, the dream isn't real. But that's true, because it's not real like other daytime things are, but it's not like it's not real, it's a dream. Like a dream is real, it's just not the same kind of real. And so what I did with her was to indicate to her practically that if she saw something anomalous, something that was out of place, right, something that was a mess, that it was within her capacity to set it right. Okay, so now, your right hemisphere tells you what monsters might inhabit the darkness. Now, what you have to do is figure out, there's two things you have to figure out. One is what to do about a given monster, and the other is to figure out what to do about the class of all possible monsters. Right. That's a whole different thing. That's something that only human beings are capable of, that level of abstraction. Right, and so what you might do about a particular monster is hide or go out and get rid of it, if it was just an actual animal, right? But that doesn't help because there's all the other potential predators that are still there. And so maybe you can go hunt all them down, but that doesn't help either because you can't hunt them all down. It's not very likely anyways. So instead, what you have to do is figure out how to configure yourself so that you're in the best possible position to fight off the monsters when they come. That's your best bet.